they went deep, but they went deep in the laziest way possible. And that's all I can really say about it is lazy. All right, guys, thanks for checking out this new superhero video that we have featured on our YouTube channel. I had such a good time talking about the Superpowers line. You guys know it's one of my favorite toy lines ever. And if you haven't seen that video, click the link in the description above to get to that video. You don't want to miss that one because that one was great. I had a lot of fun talking about that line because Superpowers, the Kenner Superpowers line was one of my all-time favorite toy lines ever. You know, going through that video, talking about how great it was. But I wanted to kind of take a different approach with this video and talk about another superhero line out at the same time that just fell short, and seeing how great Superpowers was and then seeing how much this one was not as great is an interesting scenario. While I absolutely love this line, it is something I'm going to talk about, its shortcomings. I know other people have talked about it before, but hopefully I can give you a different perspective from a toy manufacturing process about this line and the shortcuts they took and why it wasn't as good as Superpowers. So let's get on in to Mattel's Secret Wars. So Secret Wars was a giant comic event put out by Marvel. I think it was 12 issues. It was a big event. You know, it's almost like a Crisis on Infinite Earths type event. I believe this one happened before Crisis, but maybe I'm mistaken, so you can correct me in the chat. But this was Marvel's big event, and it spanned all of their characters and, you know, Fantastic Four and X-Men and Avengers, all their villains. And it was a really cool event because for a company doing toys, you had this opportunity to do all these different characters. So Mattel had gotten the license to do the Marvel Secret Wars line. Now, before Secret Wars and Superpowers, the only one doing superhero figures was Mego. Mego was doing the, you know, kind of like the 8-inch cloth, you know, clothes figures, which were fantastic. There's really no event around that. Superpowers was just the height of DC. It was so good. But then this was a point where Mattel took an event, a comic event, and said, all right, we're gonna make a figure line based around that event. And it was cool. Like I said, every character, you had crazy things like Black Costume Spider-Man, like lots of things happened. Now, Mattel didn't take advantage of all the things that happened in that storyline, which is unfortunate, but they had good intentions. And you know, the line came out in '84 and it ran through '85. Now, Kenner Superpowers came out in '84 also and ran through '86, so just a year, you know, later. While Superpowers didn't last as long either, like the superhero lines were like short-lived, whereas like Mego lasted years. It was interesting to see that the superhero toy lines just didn't really catch on. Like I said, Kenner Superpowers, amazing line. But just like that first wave, and then you started getting to the secondary characters, and the line sort of sputtered out. And I think you get the same thing with Secret Wars as you got into it. So line came out, A-listers right off the bat. Spider-Man, Captain America, Iron Man, Wolverine, Doctor Doom. And it's like you had the variant Black Costume Spider-Man. So it was like, again, A-listers right out of the gate. Then you get into the secondary characters like Kang and Baron Zemo, whereas I guess Daredevil, like nowadays Daredevil's kind of an A-lister, but I think back then he wasn't an A-lister yet. Magneto, okay, you know, big bad of you know, the X-Men. Doc Ock, then you started getting into like the third wave of like Falcon and Hobgoblin. And then the line ends with a few international figures, which unfortunately I don't have, but I've been trying really hard to get. They had international figures that were European exclusives. It was Iceman, Electro, and Constrictor. And they were three really, really cool figures. They're just very hard to get. But like starting off with the line, you know, Mattel, I don't know if they were like tight on the deadline or what, or they were just trying to cut corners, but it seemed like they just didn't put the love into the line like the Kenner team did. The Kenner team had all this great artwork to go off of, great sculpts, great action features, and then you see Mattel come in with basic 5 POA figures with like zero, you know, sculpt detail and things like that. Like, you know, I want to say that the torso for Spider-Man and Captain America are different because Spider-Man's a little more slim. But like Captain America, he doesn't have any like sculpted detail, the scaling on his, the blue part of his costume. Stuff is just basic. I mean, even the, the deco hits on Spider-Man, like looking, it's like, they couldn't even connect all the web lines because it's like they did tampo printing here and tampo printing here, but they just didn't finesse it to connect the web lines. Same thing with like, he's got tampo printing on the side here, but when you get on the inside of his forearm, they just never tampo printed that. Same thing with like on the side of his head. Like there's just so many cut corners on this line. And it's always like baffled me that they didn't put the love into this line. Now, they had the wherewithal to like sculpt this, to like give Spider-Man like a not straight up and down Star Wars pose, but like a hero stance. But then it's like the rest fell short, and then in the line, they didn't include, like some figures included accessories. Iron Man had this weird blaster that he never used, which got used for a lot of other characters. But then the weirdest part were these lenticular sort of holograms that came with them. Each figure had the same, one part fold over living hinge shield that you could put the different lenticular, and it's like came with three lenticular holograms with two sides, so it's 6 different images. But you put them in that shield, but for what purpose? Like what play value? Like I don't think a kid really cared about the lenticular hologram when you have someone like Captain America who his main accessory is his shield, yet he comes with this hologram shield. It just didn't make sense, because then you have Iron Man with a blaster, but then you have Wolverine with his claws. So it's like you gave Wolverine his signature claws, but didn't give Cap his signature shield. And for me as a manufacturer, it just made no sense, because if you're going to tool up, say, a PVC mold, for instance, like Wolverine's claws. There was a variant that had black claws, but then they changed it to silver, and it's molded silver. It's not decoed. You could have taken the PVC mold for Wolverine's claws and put Captain America's shield in that same mold. And even if you didn't want to paint the white stripe and the white star, you could just deco the red and then have the silver shine through as if it was the white. And that could have been the shield for Captain America. Daredevil has his Billy Club. It's just odd choices. Falcon has his Falcon. Doctor Doom has all 4 arms. Yet you have Magneto with no cape. It's just very, very odd choices. And I see this line so often, and I think, what were they thinking? They tooled up so many new parts, like Iron Man. He has a whole unique body, his arms, his torso, his legs. As for Captain America, I want to say his torso, I don't even think Cap's torso was used for Wolverine, because he's wide, like Wolverine has wider shoulders, Cap's more straight up and down. And then Spider-Man has a different torso. So you have 4 characters, Spider-Man, Wolverine, Captain America, and Iron Man, all with different torsos. Yet you couldn't give Cap some raised detail in that torso. And, Spider-Man's just so basic. Even Wolverine, they decoed the lines on his belt. But you could have saved yourself that deco by doing sculpted detail, because then the detail would make natural shadows and give you that belt detail without having to do deco. So things like that. Whereas, no, let's deco the lines, but not sculpt in the lines, even though we're doing a unique torso. Just made no sense. I think the same torso for Baron Zemo was used for Captain America, but you see Baron Zemo, they actually gave a PVC belt to. I think Daredevil is the same torso as Captain America, but I think he has the arms of, no, he doesn't have the arms of Spider-Man, because he has two C-grip hands, yet he comes with 1 Billy Club. Again, those sort of decision making as a toy designer, I just find so out there. And that's what has baffled me about this Secret Wars line, is that I can't for the life of me sit there and figure out what the designers were thinking you know, and how they came to these decisions. You know, Kang he uses Iron Man's arms, unique head, but then they give him this PVC secondary like belt covering. Magneto has nothing unique about him. I think he's Captain America's arms. I think he's all of Captain America's body, Magneto's head. But then it's like someone like Captain America, he has decoed eyes. Very simplistic. But then Magneto and Falcon, their eyes aren't painted at all. So again, like the shortcuts taken in this line are so frustrating as a toy fan. You're just like, why? Like, why? Because when you have such rich characters like Captain America and Spider-Man and Wolverine, like, how do you fall short with your execution? When you look at something that came out the same exact year in superpowers, and it's such an amazing toy line, just the look of them. I know, like, you know, the fact that their action features didn't hold up over years, but you know, you got to think these were made for kids, so the action features were necessary, but just the figures on their own, they just looked far superior than the superpowers figures. You know, superpowers had the knee joints and they just looked better deco, better sculpting, and these were just not good, which, you know, I look at what Mattel had done previously before Secret Wars. Over there I have Clash of the Titans Indiana Jones was Kenner, but Clash of the Titans was Mattel. Even the Clash of the Titans figures had, I think it's 4 different figures. All 4 figures have unique sculpts and tons of detail in them for being a 1980 toy line. And then it's like you see from Clash of the Titans over to Secret Wars, and it's almost like Mattel just didn't evolve. And I don't understand like how that happened, you know, because Kenner was doing so many like, you know, cool things with action figures, going from Indiana Jones and Star Wars over to superpowers. It's like they were an awesome toy manufacturer for action figures. Mattel just didn't catch up. You know, someone like Dr. Doom, it's like he was a unique sculpt. He used Iron Man's arms and legs, but he had a unique torso and head. But then they deco printed this you know, this robotic stuff on him. But it's like he didn't look like that. He had a cape. He was classic Dr. Doom, and they just took this other route. And like, think about how cool Dr. Doom or Magneto would have looked with a cape in this line. You know, you had Hobgoblin, who came later on in like Wave 3, and he was one of the harder ones to get. Like they started getting more rare with like him and Falcon, but you could tell like him and Falcon had more to them. He came with his glider, he came with a PVC cape, Falcon came with his wings and the Falcon. So it was different. Hobgoblin was all unique sculpt, which was cool. He may use I think he uses the Wolverine torso, but his arms and legs and head and cape and glider were all unique. Especially for, you know, a third tier, you know, Spider-Man villain in the third wave. It's just such odd decision making. And I've said it before, I got so frustrated. You know, the lenticular shields, especially when you have guys like Iron Man and Dr. Doom coming with blasters, and the same blaster was used for Iron Man, Dr. Doom, Baron Zemo, Kang, and Magneto. And you're like, you know, you couldn't make something different? Like that's like cutting corners at its most epic. Baron Zemo has a bunch of unique parts with his boots or his legs, his arms, and his belt and his head. And his arm. Actually, looking at it, Baron Zemo is the same torso as Captain America, but the rest of him is all new. So it's like, again, like for Baron Zemo, for like this secondary villain, incredibly frustrating. And you know, you look at the 3 figures like Constrictor and Electro and Iceman. Electro and Iceman don't come with any accessories. Constrictor comes with a little like almost like a half a Daredevil Billy Club with his, you know, like they use like a string for his whip. Better looking figure. Iceman's pretty cool looking. Electro looks great, but again, it's like Electro with no eyes painted. So they just kept cutting corners all the way till the end. you know, I just, every time, like, I come in here and I walk past these cases and I see, like, from Superpowers, this is so impressive. And then it's like, I purposefully put Secret Wars here, not just because it's superheroes, but to show, like, in the same exact year and time frame, how two companies can do something totally different. And just one puts love into a line and the other just cut corners for hopefully a quick payday. And this was unfortunate. And, you know, you look back and you think, like, man, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating for me. And I know when I was at Hasbro and we were talking about how to evolve the 4-inch line, and, you know, tooling was getting cut down. We were starting to remove articulation and deco because the figure was rising in cost and the price was rising, but we weren't giving them the same price value. I said, what if we took a step back? What if we went and did this again? And I remember I pitched this, me and my marketer at the time, we pitched basically Secret Wars 2.0. And everyone balked at it, like, no way, never gonna do anything like that. The funny thing is, years later, they kind of did it. And they brought back 5 POA figures, but not in the same vein. And I remember when we pitched the idea to Marvel, Marvel was like, you can never do that Mattel packaging because that's Mattel's packaging, which is interesting. I get it, you know, which just would have been cool if, like, Hasbro could do a Secret Wars packaging that was originated by Mattel. Would have been kind of fun. But I wanted a chance to fix this, and we just didn't get that opportunity. So, yeah, so Secret Wars is a line that I love. Like, I love it. They did, you know, a play set up there. They did some vehicles. Like, they went deep, but they went deep in the laziest way possible. And that's all I can really say about it is lazy. Because how can you say it's not lazy when you see one company doing this and then another company at the same exact time doing this? And I think that's what's so polarizing. I think if these came out 5 years ahead of Superpowers, it probably wouldn't even be a conversation. But literally 1984, even if Secret Wars came out and they saw what Superpowers was doing, and then if you saw, like, Wave 2, Wave 3, they started changing and evolving and doing more detailed figures and more stuff to them, I think it would have made sense. But the fact that they just rode that lazy wave all the way through, it's baffling to me. I mean, I would love to be able to, like, talk to the original designer that was part of this line and say, what went into this? You know, we've seen so many videos where a lot of the old Kenner employees from the Star Wars days gave their 2 cents on what happened and things like that. But I feel like that's where me, as a manufacturer and a toy designer, I want to know, like, the history of it. Like, when I see, you know, Kenner was notorious for reusing parts. You look at the Robin Hood Prince of Thieves line, and it used Superpowers, RoboCop, and Star Wars all in the same line, which is wild that they pieced together this one line off a bunch of different toy lines. You know, what was their rationale going into it? So I would love to be able to talk to someone on this team and say, what was it? Were you guys really hard up for cost? Were you hard up for schedule? Like, because I just see a lot of corner cutting and laziness going into this line when it could have been something really awesome. So that's my 2 cents on Secret Wars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully it was a little bit different than what you're used to hearing about, you know, just a retrospective of a line. Hopefully I can give you guys more of this sort of insight into my favorite lines and what I think and what goes into them. But yeah, this one is baffling to me. So hopefully one day we'll get some answers on Mattel's Secret Wars. But until then, we're just left with this. So thanks, guys, for checking out this video. Again, make sure you check out that Superpowers video, and thank you guys for digging the channel.